The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Here comes Casey from a double stagger, puts it up on the way. Got it! Got it! Got it! Got it! 34-30, Nebraska by 4. Casey Tominaga. Intercepted pass. Hoiberg the other way. Lays it up and off the window. Sammy Hoiberg. How about those Huskers? How about the Huskers? It's a 3. Got it! Sammy, my boy. Hoiberg with a 3. 9-point Cornhusker lead. Mark Hoiberg drives the ball, reverse layup on the left hand. Oh my goodness! Circus shot, absolutely circus shot by Sammy Hoiberg. What a game by Hoiberg. Huskers up 11, 41-30. Right hash mark, CJ got it, got it, got it. CJ Wilcher, double figures with 10. Huskers jump out on top by 8.
The crowd back on their feet here at the vault.
Here's an intercepted pass by Hoiberg. Hoiberg layup good. Sam Hoiberg, the governor. He's got Tominaga coming to it. Hyde's chasing him, fires and scores it. Unbelievable. Unbelievable 3 by Casey Tominaga.
Get this ball in bounds. Let this crowd storm the floor, baby.
Gillis into Braden Smith. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And for the first time in 41 years, Nebraska knocks off the top-ranked team in the country, and they are storming the floor. They are storming the floor. They are storming the floor.
Love it.
Sign your name, Fred Hoiberg. There's your signature win.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio. That is Kent Pavelka, the excellent Kent Pavelka, the immortal Kent Pavelka. Jake Milheisen, friend of the show. We can just loop that for the next hour 55, and you'll still have the hair on your arm standing up. What a ball game, what a win, what a takedown by Nebraska of number 1 Purdue. Husker basketball, that bandwagon's beyond standing room only. Going to need more of a bandwagon. And Big Red gets it done. Kudos to Elijah. I'm going to owe him a side of beef at this rate for my steak and beer bets. I didn't think Nebraska could do it. They did it, and you loved it at PBA last night. Open phones for you here at 489-1240 with Hail Varsity Radio. Guys, we'll dive into the win, the upset, the throttling, quite frankly, of Nebraska and Purdue. Pretty incredible. We'll check in with Mike Babcock. He's seen a lot of Husker basketball and some Husker football news in the transfer portal. A plug-and-play offensive lineman. We'll chat with Evan Bland about that. Husker Wrestling, Nebraska, Iowa, Friday. Mark Manning joins us at 5:25, and then a Jock Doc. Fellas, how we doing? Before you answer, let's get the roll call. Our starting 5 here at Hail Varsity in the stream. The Hail Varsity YouTube channel is where you can check us out. Also on Hail Varsity Radio Twitter at HVarsity Radio. Mike checks in. Brennan from the Black Hills in second. Anthony in third. Roger 4. Eric rounds it out. Our starting 5, and then we shout out to Brandon. He sneaks in at 6th, and Dion 7. So we've extended the bench a little bit. But how you feeling? I filmed a lot of the storming. Me and hundreds of my fellow PBA friends. Elijah Herbel lived the mosh pit. Connor Clark, you're with us on the stream. I bet you were just feeling it as well, as long as of a basketball fan as you have been. What a moment for Nebraska basketball.
I mean, last night was something that I don't think I ever saw coming. I'm in the same boat as you, Schmitty. I did not see Nebraska winning that game. it was the questionable status of Bryce Williams for me. I thought that was, a little bit too much. Maybe that puts Purdue over the edge advantage-wise, but I think Nebraska played as close to a great game as you could, and that's what needed to happen last night. And that's exactly what happened last night. I mean, the team shot the three ball well. They shot the ball well in general. They made their shots count at the free throw line. A lot of hustle plays. I think arguably, Juwan Gary and Sam Hoiberg had some of the most valuable minutes on the team last night. And I know they didn't lead the team in scoring, but just some of the plays that they were able to make last night, it was unbelievable watching it all the way over here in Illinois. The only bad thing about last night is, man, I wish I was in the building for that because it looked absolutely phenomenal. Can't believe that happened. And that is a separator in March. This team, barring it stays healthy, is an NCAA tournament team, and I think I can say that pretty confidently.
It says that, Elijah, you didn't need a helmet, didn't need a mouthpiece. It was a friendly court storming.
I mean, there were people packed in, but no, I don't think anyone left that court storming bumped and bruised. Unless you were in the middle with Josiah Alec giving you chest bumps. He was pretty aggressive in the center from what I saw on video. I didn't get that close. I was a late arriver a little bit to the court storming. I wasn't one of those people that was racing across the court and going, full chest bump with somebody else going full speed from the other way. I wasn't that far. For transparity's sake, I was gifted some free tickets. Thank you to Will Wilson, morning hookup here on KFOR. His parents weren't going. He texted me, and we were talking on the show yesterday. I said, oh, no, the game's on Peacock. I don't know how I'm going to watch it. Luckily, Will to the rescue sent me a text, hey, if you're not going, I got 2 tickets for you.
You got $50?
It was free, so thank you.
Nice.
That's the biggest favor ever.
Thank you to the Wilson family. They allowed me to see that. We're up on the 200 level, me and my buddy Alex. And with 4 minutes left, Kise hits that three-pointer, under 4 media timeout, and I say, we're going down. We're going to find our way into that lower bowl. And there was a nice gentleman who let us sit in the 2 empty seats on the end of his row for the final couple minutes of that game. And then as soon as the buzzer hit, we're racing down the aisle, hopping over a railing, getting down on the court, entered on the side over by the Purdue bench. I would like to note for Coach Matt Painter, there was plenty of security personnel keeping the fans away from the Purdue team, so I don't think they were ever in very much danger. There's an inherent slight danger that comes with court storming. I don't think they were in danger. The Husker security and staff down the floor did a very good job keeping the Purdue team away from the fans, but it's not many times in your life you get to experience a court storming. I made sure to make it down into the lower bowl. I hopped a railing, got to experience that, put a picture up on my Twitter, and then was out of there. It was very hot down on the floor, and the people were very excited, rightfully so. A win that goes down in Husker basketball memory, at least my lifetime, is probably the biggest. No-sit Sundays right there, too, because of its importance to get into the tournament. But to take down the number one team in the country on your floor, that was special.
Timing is everything, and no-sit Sundays, right? The final 10 days of the season, right? Frank the Tank and company come in for Wisconsin. You'd already had a win at Michigan State, top 10 Michigan State that year with Tim Miles. You follow it up, you bookend it before the Big Ten tournament, and you get Frank the Tank.
I'm seeing what you're seeing, Elijah.
A quick note here. We'll come back to this later in the show. Breaking news 1 minute ago from Bruce Feldman. Coach Nick Saban has informed the Alabama football team that he is retiring effective immediately.
Okay.
This also from Chris Lowe and Bruce Feldman, both on this news.
Wow.
So we'll get back to that later in the show. That's a bombshell.
That is Nick Saban saying goodbye, and Pete Carroll walking away from Seattle, and Nebraska takes down top seed right now in the NCAA tournament, Purdue. It was dramatic with the way Nebraska responded, but it was an AK by Nebraska when you look at the number. You win by 16 points. Let's talk about that moment. A guy that really paced Nebraska on offense and went right at the reigning National Player of the Year was Rink Mast. I love how he was able to kind of get his offense going, was annoying in his own words early on against Edey down low. I think the barometer for this basketball team is Juwan Gary. I think old Juan, as his teammates call him, if he's active and aggressive and playing with passion, you've seen in Nebraska's wins this year, his ability to score, his ability to defend, his ability to do the dirty work has come through. Indiana, Michigan State, and again last night, that floor dive early really juiced up PBA. It was incredible. Sam Hoiberg is the shot of energy every time he comes off the bench, especially at home for Nebraska basketball fans and his teammates. Keisei and Wiltshire, let's take these two fellas to the craps table. They are on the mother of all heaters from beyond the arc. It's been incredible. But here's Rink. He talks about the moment. Did so last night, and he really, big-time competitor, super composed, and they are proud of what they did. But, guys, as they're sitting up at the podium in the postgame, they're all ready to move on to Iowa. They want to not be a one-hit wonder. They'll have this forever in their back pocket that they took down number one, but there's more work to do. Here's Rink on last night's moment.
I mean, it doesn't get much bigger than this one. Like, you played number one team, reigning National Player of the Year. I just see that as a challenge. And luckily the shots were going in the beginning and gave the team a little spark, and everybody started believing, hey, there's something there today. So, I mean, yeah, rise to the moment. I think everybody did that today.
That they did. It was incredible. And growing up, I've had a chance to see a lot of Nebraska basketball. My golden era, many Nebraska fans' golden era, that knee run of tournaments, the teams that Coach Jeff Smith was an assistant on with Pikowski and Chubbuck and Badgett, Mikey Moore, Strick. I mean, just some incredible players that went to 4 straight NCAAs. The bookend was Lou and our dear friend Andy Markowski. That last tournament pre-Miles, and Nebraska was almost bulletproof at the Bob Devaney Sports Center against the who's who: Kansas, Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Missouri. They'd all come in one time or another with single digits next to their name, and they may have ended up number one or made it to a Final Four, but this is different. This hits different because of how it happened for Nebraska, how they responded to Purdue's push in that second half, guys. And quite honestly, the way they're able to 180 this thing, 180 by, you still, and rightfully so, had questions about them after Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's Elite Eight good. We'll burn that tape if I'm wrong. But Nebraska looked the part last night against a team in Purdue that really had no answers. I mean, they were befuddled by Nebraska's energy and intensity defensively. Then you factor in Nebraska's elite shot making. That's incredible. I think Nebraska, they can keep doing this. I'll talk to you Friday about how I'm going to bet it. I don't know. What's your trust level like? You ready to say I do to this team?
I mean,
at home.
But for them, they still, God, and I sound like such a, yeah, but wait, guy.
It's the Husker PTSD.
No, it is, but you still need to see it on the road more times than not, right?
Well, I think the next 2 games, which are on the road, may I add?
Yeah, it's Iowa City and
winnable
Rutgers.
games.
They're totally winnable, but they're also losable. Fair?
I think that's a fair take. I think, honestly, Rutgers is more losable than the Iowa one, just because Rutgers has been so good at the rack this year. But, I mean, this is a team that, and you kind of mentioned it earlier, Schmidt, about the word response. And I think you could take that and put it into maybe even 4 different parts over the last 3 or 4 days. The response from the loss at Wisconsin, right? The response to Mason Gillis lighting it up early in the game. The response to the run that Purdue made at the start of the second half made it a 1-point game. I mean, all of that. And you mentioned Purdue didn't really have an answer for that. Every single time that the Boilers made a run last night, there was a counterpunch that was 10 times harder from Nebraska. So I think you have to give a ton of credit to Nebraska for that. That gives me a lot of confidence in this team going forward. Are they going to win every game that they see? Obviously not. It's the Big Ten Conference. Anything can happen. You saw that last night. But I think that response factor that this team has, been able to develop gives you a lot more confidence than you maybe would have before. And I think the next 2 games are winnable. To your point, they're also losable. But if they are able to stack some wins, you come home against Northwestern. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'm just saying.
A win like last night lets you get ahead of yourself a little bit as a fan.
Come on. They beat the number one team in the country by 16 points. How could I not?
And I'd just like to add here, maybe my boldest take of this first segment. Any game that Nebraska shoots 61% from behind the arc, I think they have a pretty good chance of getting it done, as evidenced by last night. Doesn't matter who they're playing. 61% from behind the arc, while is a bit higher than expected, it didn't feel like an exceptional three-point shooting night from Nebraska. It felt really good, don't get me wrong, but it didn't feel like something that was so out of character that
they've been doing it. I mean, they did it against Indiana. They did it against Michigan State, right? They have
the shooters. Well.
A team shooting 61%, hard to replicate, but they have the shooters to put together some really, really high three-point shooting numbers. And it's hard to call that a recipe for success moving forward, 61%. But they have the shooters to get it done with a really, really good clip behind the arc. They
have the offense either in rink or the kick out to compete and score. It's going to come down to their defense. Do they replicate that energy like they brought with them to K-State, like they did have against Indiana? They can flip a switch. That switch was on all night against Purdue. It just wasn't at Wisconsin. Mike Babcock's with us next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Lots to get into today. Celebration across Husker Nation with the Husker basketball squad rolling number one Purdue. Mike Babcock with us from Hail Varsity and Herd at Sports. Babbers, we've got some things to tackle, bud. Nebraska v. Purdue, Nick Saban's swan song, and in addition to the offensive line, you've seen a lot of Nebraska basketball, Mike. You've seen this team and the runs they've made in past years. What'd you make of last night, and how portable is it as we look towards the season for, well, Nebraska maybe being able to put on some dancing shoes for the first time in a decade?
Well, I think that I was shocked by the upset. But as I watched the game, as aggressive as Nebraska was, and as gritty as Nebraska was, I was more optimistic as they began the second half, and then you had that run, and then they responded to that. You guys mentioned it earlier, but every time Purdue did something, Nebraska responded, had the ability to respond, and I think that was the thing that I came away with. That and the way things were distributed among players. Everybody contributed. It was a team effort. There's no question about that. Bryce Williams, 11 rebounds, 9 assists. I mean, that's the kind of play that you need to get from him. And you four guys in double figure scoring.
Could have been 6.
I just think, no, go ahead.
I said it could have been 6. They were an eyelash away from 6.
Yeah. You need that kind of balance. Just says a lot, I think, about what Nebraska can do. And I was just, now how do you come back off of the energy of that win? Can you translate that energy into the next game, which is on the road, which is at Iowa, or is there a fall off? Because sometimes that's what happens when you come through an emotional experience like that. But I'm hoping and figuring that maybe it'll be an energy that will carry over to the road game.
Mike, whenever you look at Keisei, his performance last night, where does he rank in your mind in terms of fan favorites with Husker basketball? Because whenever CJ was hitting some shots down the stretch, it was loud in there, but it means something else whenever Keisei hits one.
Yeah, he's really popular, and I think it's the part of it is the confidence. For one thing, it's his ability to hit three-pointers. That's the defining shot now, the guy that can hit the three-point shots consistently. And he can hit them from, like he step on the floor in the arena, and it seems like he can hit a three-point shot. There's no situation where, certainly across the midcourt line, once he's open, he can put it up and make that shot. And I think that just the energy that he brings and his ability to hit those 3-point shots puts him among the tops and fan favorites.
Mike Babcock is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. And just to think about last night, Mike, real quick, the first place my mind went to was the first couple of years of Fred Hoiberg. This team was winning 7 games. Now, I know it's not the same players, but it's the same program. So how do you wrap your mind around the turnaround that's happened over the last 4.5 years or so?
It's dramatic what's happened here now, but I think that there was a plan. People are like, well, he's not getting the job done. Let's start looking another direction. But I think he had a plan, and I think he's gotten the right players through transfers and so forth to do the things that he wants done, to fit the system that he wants to apply. And I think you're seeing the results of that now. I think that's, again, patience is not something that people have these days. It's like a couple of years and, things are not getting done, let's move on. You got to have some patience. And I think if you do have some patience, I think it's going to pay off if you have the right coach. I think they have the right coach in basketball. I think the same thing applies to Matt Rule in football. You have to have a little bit of patience in order for him to get the pieces in place to get his program where he wants it to be. And also, you get him storming the court with his cell phone ready and with Trev Alberts and I think Matt Rule's daughter, right? That says a lot.
It was a pretty awesome scene.
Mike, I want to shift away from hoops for 2 seconds and your reaction to Nick Saban's news of retiring, stepping away at the age of 72. I know there was a lot of crossover, a lot of blueprint from his time at Alabama and even Michigan State. Saban really close with Coach Osborne and Coach McBride.
Yeah, those we've told this story before probably, but those 2 Michigan State games where Nebraska just hammered the Spartans, and Osborne talked to him after the first one and said, you're not as bad as this. And I think from that point on, they've had kind of a relationship in the sense of doing things in a similar way for Saban. And on one level, it doesn't surprise me because he's 72 years old and probably looks at it's kind of time to do that. But anytime you have an icon like that step down, it's a surprise. Same way with Pete Carroll taking an advisory role and not coaching it. The Seahawks anymore. Those are both things that surprise me, even though I can understand maybe the reasoning behind it.
And dare I say, Mike, I mean, you kind of made the point there. Was Nebraska, Michigan State, was that the worst loss of Nick Saban's career? I think in a roundabout way, you could argue if it wasn't for Tom Osborne in Nebraska, Nick Saban and the dynasty at Bama may have never been.
Well, I think that it certainly, one of the things that I remember Saban saying after that first loss, if he didn't have the players that were willing to do what needed to be done, then he'd get rid of them. That he was pretty aggressive in his comments afterward, but his comments included, what Osborne had told him, and I think that was really important at that point, because there's his first game as head coach at Michigan State, and they just get drilled. And then the next season, it's not much better. Maybe even been a bigger disparity. I can't remember the exact scores, but I do remember that that was a big part of it. He still talked about it years later in interviews. He talked about the influence that Osborne had in simply saying what he said after those games.
Mike, the names here for the next head coach of Alabama, Dan Lanning, of course, Kirby Smart disciple, and did really great work at Oregon. Kalen DeBoer's name's coming up for the Seahawks. It's coming up for Alabama. He's a tremendous coach at Washington. And then the old walk-on that Gene Stallings put on scholarship that did pretty well in Clemson, Dabo Swinney.
Yeah, what the names? Those are not surprise names, right? What? I don't know. I think it's too early to say. Maybe there'll be another name that'll pop up at some point, or they'll do their due diligence, no question. And that's obviously an attractive job on the one hand. Saban was making what, $11 million a year?
Yeah.
The new coach probably not going to get that much money, but it's an attractive job. But it also comes with a tremendous amount of expectation. Can you imagine stepping in for Nick Saban? This is what Osborne said. What it was like following Bob Devaney. Devaney's success at Nebraska. Turns out he was a Hall of Fame coach. How difficult it was. And Tom even went to the point of applying for a couple of other jobs. Augustana was one of them. Then when Nebraska went to the bowl game in Texas, what was the Sun Bowl? Was it in '69? Tom went over and interviewed for a job down there.
Texas Tech.
Texas Tech job. Yeah. He interviewed for the Texas Tech job, even though Bob Devaney had already said, hey, I want you to succeed me when I decide that it's time to step aside. He told him that in 1968, coming back from the Kansas State game. So following Nick Saban is going to be a really difficult, great expectations task. And if you go in there and you're 11-1 the first year, maybe they'll accept that, or maybe they'll expect 12-0. And certainly you've got to be in the playoffs, so it will expanded to 12 teams. So those have to be taken into consideration, I think, when you're looking at who might step in there.
And there's one name that just keeps on coming to mind for me. Doesn't have a job right now.
Oh, don't know. Really? Are you serious?
No, I'm not going to where you think I'm going. Brian Ferentz, welcome to the Tide.
That's worse than the name I was thinking.
Yeah, I think Schmidt and I were thinking of the same
Oh,
guy.
I know exactly who you're thinking of.
Who are you thinking of? What was it?
I'm thinking he's 2 under right now in Scottsdale on the golf course.
And not Gary Barnett.
No,
not Gary.
Last thought, Mike. You look at Nebraska, and they go portaling again, and they're able to land a pretty talented transfer. Mazzccua, Florida lineman, spent some time at Baylor, and kind of a plug-and-play option. We got about 60 seconds. Do you like the pickup?
Yeah, looks like he's an aggressive guy, and looks like he can get the job done.
Your tone there's beautiful. An aggressive guy.
Just the right amount.
Yeah. Well, I think any help you can get, because I think the offensive line is really important to what Matt Rule wants to get accomplished on offense, and you've got to be able to protect the quarterback, and you've got to be able to open some holes to be able to establish a running game. So you can't have too many offensive linemen, I think, and create some competition there and fill in some spots.
Mike Babcock, subscribe to him with Hurrdat Sports, his bi-weekly newsletter, MikeB@HurrdatSports.com. Send Babbers an email, and can find him, of course, with Hail Varsity. And we love checking in with you on Wednesdays, Babbers. Take care, be good, and stay warm, all right?
I'll do that. I'm no candidate for the Alabama job.
That's not maroon Babbers is wearing.
Way to squash those rumors now.
All right, Babbers, take care, buddy. Thank you so much.
See you guys.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time at Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Still smiling if you're a Nebraska fan, Nebraska basketball fan, knocking down Purdue. What's Matt Painter say about court storming as he let the topic have it last night. We'll get there in a little bit. The news, Nick Saban retiring from Alabama. Where do you go? Our dear friend Brennan from the Black Hills checks in, and he prefaces this by saying, hypothetical incoming, if Bama comes knocking for Rule, do you go? And I say this, if Matt Rule had been in Lincoln earlier, or had a better season one, or
didn't have a 5-star quarterback waiting in the wings.
Right. I mean, Matt Rule's track record says he'll win for you. Right now, in Kevin Steele's retirement, I didn't think anything of it last week when he retired. I just didn't. Because, Kevin Steele's mid-60s and he's been to 100 places and he's been great. He's been a pillar for great programs to resurrect. Wherever they've been, wherever he's been, they've won, right? They've won championships. Nebraska with Osborne, Clemson, not Miami. He was there for a year and then left, but 3 or 4 tours at Alabama, one at Auburn. That's Kevin Steele. But with Saban, this name, and Scott threw it out there in the stream. You're welcome to comment and join us on the stream. Hail Varsity YouTube channel, Hail Varsity Radio, Twitter at HVarsity Radio, 489-1240. Urban Meyer. Urban will probably try and get his name out there in it. But, man, he's still 57, 58 years old. Urban's got a great track record of going to ready-made former winners. And right now with NIL and everything, you've got to keep a bunch of players you just signed, Elijah, happy. Keep them there. If you're betting man, are you going to bet Sweeney? That'd be where I go. I would bet Dabo. And I think Dabo's probably felt a little underappreciated in Clemson the last couple of years.
I'm thinking of the coaches that have been at the top of their game, have been a little underappreciated. Dabo's one. Ryan Day. I think Ryan Day could be looking to leave the Ohio State University. I'm not sure he makes a whole bunch of sense from Bama's point of view, but he has the recruiting
I think Ryan Day's next move is the NFL.
I think so. But if Bama comes knocking,
same pressure cooker in a.
But you don't have to play Michigan every single year.
Well, you might. Playoffs now 12.
But
there you go.
I look at landing at Georgia or at Oregon. That makes some sense.
Does Kirby leave Georgia?
But it also feels like a great time for Oregon to really take care of Dan Lanning and make sure he doesn't.
Yeah.
You don't want this. You don't want the third time being the charm if you're Oregon and Uncle Phil.
Exactly. So I don't know about all that.
Seen a lot of Lane Kiffin in the chat too.
Ooh.
I think that would be a breaking case of emergency.
Is
higher
Lane
for Alabama? Like, Kirby, Dabo, Ryan Day, Pete Carroll, Lanning have all said no. Then you go to Kiffin.
I don't know if he would leave Ole Miss though. Would he?
Oh, he'd leave Ole Miss.
Ole Miss.
He almost left Ole Miss last year.
Yeah, every chance he gets, his agent gets him another $2 million every year. Ole Miss is
that's just called good leverage.
Near and dear to Elijah's heart.
I wouldn't want him to leave Ole Miss. I think he's great there. I'm a huge Lane Kiffin fan.
I think he is too. But does Lane Kiffin want to just kind of be stuck at 8-4? Do they have a playoff possibility right now? Sure.
I mean, one thing that I know about my time going down to Ole Miss is it's a great setup, but it is not the destination.
It's still not. It's not Bama.
It's not Bama. Like at the end of the day, Ole Miss, they have a lot of money that goes through that school. They don't have as much in terms of athletic donations as you would think. For as well as they do in the portal, you'd think, they must have all this NIL money in the back pocket. They really don't do as well with athletic donations. There's a reason there's so many streets in Oxford named after the Mannings. The Mannings have taken care of Oxford and the Ole Miss football program for a while. Outside of them, like the notable boosters Ole Miss has, not quite there. Ole Miss isn't the destination you might think of it to be.
I like Lane. There's so many Saban proteges that there are options. Who's on the line?
Bruce is on the line with us.
Bruce, thanks for calling. Go for it.
Hey, guys. Let's throw another iron in the fire. We're at the big Sabres. What about Harbaugh not staying at Michigan? He hasn't signed his contract yet.
That's kind of been the game. I think he wants to either make them pay for cutting his salary in half about 4 years ago, or he's hard set on the NFL.
The problem with Harbaugh, and if you're insinuating maybe he's an option for Bama, is the fact that he has such deep ties to Michigan, being an athlete there, just winning the national championship.
Yeah, he wouldn't leave Michigan for Bama.
He either leaves for the NFL or he doesn't leave at all.
Yeah, it's kind of where I'm at.
He's going to San Diego.
Los Angeles. That's one in the swear jar.
But we all wish it was still San Diego.
I think including the Chargers organization.
Well, now that the Bears are out on him, too, I think the probability of him staying at Michigan grows a little bit, but maybe that's just me. Just because, again,
I think he's gone, dude.
Well, if he's got the ties to Michigan and wouldn't leave, I mean, he had the ties to the Bears. That's like what I'm saying.
This is the high note you walk out on if you're Harbaugh.
That is true.
Saban was just a bad snap away from playing for another title. Bruce, thanks for the phone call. Think about this coaching cycle, NFL and college. How silly it's truly gotten. Saban means Bama's open. Harbaugh, NFL, maybe Michigan becomes open. Pete Carroll steps down at Seattle today. What else is next? Dare we ask? Nebraska beats Purdue? Pretty cool.
Pigs are going to be flying soon.
I think so.
Yep.
Can we hear Matt Painter whining about court storming? It wasn't just specifically directed at Nebraska. It's the topic as a whole.
We got to do something about the court storms, guys. I don't know why institutions aren't ready for it. Like, what did you think was going to happen if they won? Like, spread the word. Spread the word before somebody gets hurt. You know, a student from Nebraska should be able to storm the court, right? Like, we're cool, but just like get ready for it. That's what you're going to do. So like we're struggling in our conference with that. Our freshmen, sophomore, and juniors have never lost a road game without a court storm. Think about that. So think about that. Put that in your article. All right? Because someone's going to get hurt. Someone's going to get hurt, and it could be a student, could be one of Nebraska's guys, could be one of our guys, could be someone working the scores bench, could be anybody. But like, I don't know why people don't get ahead of it. All right, it's happened a lot, and it's just, I don't understand that. Well, they just, you got to have order. You got to get a rope. You got to get police officers. You got to get people around and protect your own, protect us, protect them, protect the fans. I don't know. I'm not a cop. I don't work security. Right.
I don't have a mustache.
But we have to do something. No, nothing happened. But something's going to happen. Like, that's not how you can't think through things like this. Something's going to happen.
So that is Matt Painter ticked off. My suggestion, fellas, just don't lose.
I've heard this argument for years. Yeah, Matt Painter clearly hates fun. I've heard this argument for years. Something's going to happen. I've still yet to see anything happen. I mean, in the NFL, you had that one fan who got punched who deserved it, but like...
You get fined in college football.
This is interesting. I have a dueling opinion. We could get to it on the other side.
Next, we'll get there. Hail Varsity winding down hour 1, 489-1240. Evan Bland coming up. Mark Manning, Husker Wrestling at 525.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Winding down this first hour, it's Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager, Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, and Connor Clark. Reminder about your friends at the NDOT Highway Safety Office. One of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an impaired driver. Why take chances if you drink or use other substances? Don't drive. Impaired driving is deceptively dangerous. A message from the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Okay, we were talking court storming. We've talked a little bit here about Saban stepping down at Alabama. One kind of equals the other as far as the amount of bodies that want to take that gig. And some just don't want to dance with it at all. I'm going to stay in my seat, Elijah. I'm not going to get down in the mosh pit. I have no interest in following a legend like Nick Saban. That's some mindset. It's not a competitive mindset, but it is a large shadow. What were you going to say about Painter and his frustration? 3 times his kids have been court rushed.
Well, maybe this is a little bit of a bias thing for me because I think Matt Painter is one of the best coaches in the country. He's one of my favorite personally. And when you think about it, and again, I wasn't there last night, so you guys could talk to it, at least security-wise, better than I could. But The thing he said about the freshmen, sophomores, and juniors have not experienced a road loss that doesn't feature a court storming, regardless of the number, is absurd. I mean, that is just a ridiculous stat. Just proves how good they are, right? So the more times it happens to you, I understand the concern because, I mean, this is like a regular thing now with Purdue basketball just because they're so good. And then a team like Nebraska or Northwestern twice beats them. And maybe the Northwestern thing is a little more dangerous because Welsh Ryan Arena is a lot more compact. It's a lot more on top of the court than Pinnacle Bank is. So maybe that's where he's coming from. But I understand his point of view. Again, it didn't really look like on TV there was anything super unsafe about it. And again, you guys have said that security did a solid job on it anyway. But when it happens to you that often, I can understand why you're concerned about the way that it's handled at some places. Not every place, but at some places.
That's fair.
That's fair, but it's no fun.
No, I agree.
And Elijah,
we should be able to storm the court. I think the school should totally be able to storm the court.
And he said that, students.
Yes.
But you had all genres of Husker basketball fan, all ages, from everywhere.
The funniest thing I saw was the class isn't in session right now, so this is all huddle employees out there on the court right now.
Which is good for, you're there with your dad, and you've grown up watching Nebraska basketball, and you're smiling about this.
I think it's a Welsh Ryan Arena thing, since it's happened to them twice there. And again, if you've never been in that building, it's 7,000 people. You're right on top of the court. There's like way less room between sideline and stands than there is at Pinnacle. I think it has something to do with that.
And full credit to Husker fans for how, honestly, for a court storming, it was organized last night. It was safe. Matt Painter wasn't really in the melee. I only had to punch one Purdue player to get my way down there, so...
Wow.
Sarcasm.
Someone's a little angry. Matthew checks in on the stream. He says, Kirby to Bama, Urban to Georgia. Mike asks a great question. How much input does Saban have on selecting his successor? It's interesting because Bill Byrne wanted to make the pick once T.O. stepped down. T.O.'s like, no, I get to pick, and it's Frank. Well, his son... is the AD at Alabama, Bill Byrne's son. Hour 2, coming up here, Evan Bland next.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back with you at Tower 2 at Hail Varsity, powered by Cornhead Lager. Our dear friend Mike Schaefer posting a picture of Coach O. That's his vote for taking over Bama. Instead of saying, go Tigers, he can say, roll Tide.
I like Brian Ferentz more still.
Yeah, I know. I like Evan Bland. Love what he does when it comes to coverage of Nebraska football, Husker baseball, Omaha World Herald, where you find Evan at Evan Bland, OWH, on Twitter. Evan, nothing to see here. No news today between Husker basketball, the portal edition for the Big Red, and Coach Saban. How are you?
Wow. Yeah, our pets' heads are falling off as well. I don't know how we're going to cope.
Such a good line in the movie. I want to start with with college football / just football coaches. Did you believe 2024 would bring us Nick Saban retiring, Pete Carroll stepping down? We don't know for sure about Bill Belichick, but Vrabel, and of course Jim Harbaugh. I mean, those are some names that could be on the move or could be finding a rocking chair. And that domino effect, DeBoer, Sweeney, Lanning are some hot names right now. Of course, Coach Rule's always been a popular name as well, not necessarily in this cycle or with these openings, but who's to say you wouldn't kick tires? What a earthquake 2024 has given us for the college football and some NFL openings.
Yeah, no doubt. It's really amazing. I mean, you think all those names that you threw out there, Belichick, maybe the greatest in NFL history, certainly what Saban's done, And, what I think is interesting is this is just the start, right? Like this, there's going to be so many dominoes that fall from this. Who does Alabama get? And then who fills that Power 5 job that comes open? And how does that all sort of backfill, its way through? And some of it is probably age-related. I mean, Saban's in his 70s. I think Bill Belichick's in the same general window. Some of it, I think, too, though, is you think how much the sport's changed since those coaches in particular got into it back in the day. I mean, with all the things that are going on now, the attention, the money, the NIL, the transfer portal at the college level, like you see a lot of coaches, at some point kind of saying, look, this is a 12-month-a-year, 365-day-a-year sort of job, and it didn't used to be that way, but it's that way now, and like the level of commitment that it takes to achieve greatness now is so high. I mean, it's just remarkable the wins and just the consistency that guys like Belichick and Saban have had. And so, you certainly salute what they've done, and you wonder how anyone can ever live up to it and who it's going to be moving forward. I certainly don't envy whoever that next person is at Alabama, because, Nebraska fans can tell you when the great one steps out, it's really hard to live up to that. So I think that'll be fascinating to follow.
Yeah, Evan, that will be fascinating. You mentioned the domino effect that could potentially happen. Maybe, though, they don't go poach another head coach. And no, I'm not going Brian Ferentz here. Urban Meyer, though, I think piques a lot of people's interest. It sounded like he's wanting to get back into coaching. We will see where the tide goes.
And why not land in Alabama, where presumably my roster's awesome, despite the fact that you've had a ton of portal options or portal departures, thank you, right after you lost to Michigan, and now what you just signed, there's 30 days those kids can leave as well. Yeah, so
we'll see.
Urban walks into a lot of good situations, though.
So Bama doesn't have a lot of time here. I think they have to act quickly in order to protect their roster. We'll see where they go. That'll be interesting to follow, Evan. But let's switch gears here, talk some Husker football. The news of the day, Mazzccua, the Florida offensive line transfer. This came a little bit out of nowhere. I don't think his name had been floated around all that much, but today he announced on Twitter that he will be attending the University of Nebraska next season, presumably going to take one of those starting guard spots. I want to get your reaction to this. A year after Nebraska swung and a missed on Mazzccua, they get him back in the boat via the transfer portal.
I think in the short history of the portal, and certainly in the kind of free transfer era, like this might be the most out of the blue positive portal news that Nebraska's had from a player from another school, in part because he never did make an official visit this cycle. He did last cycle when he almost chose Nebraska and ended up picking Florida, but there was no real rumblings externally that he was even thinking about Nebraska this time around. And I spoke with his dad a little earlier, and they said their circumstance was such that until the NCAA last month brought down that ruling that multi-time transfers who were not grad transfers could move around and still be eligible next season elsewhere, they were all set to go to the NFL and figure out the next level from there. And so, I mean, what a turn of events that ruling came down, that Nebraska had an in terms of the coaching staff that recruited him to Baylor out of high school in Pennsylvania, that his brother, Maurice, is a walk-on running back on the roster. So, I mean, it all lined up perfectly. And, oh, by the way, he's been a multi-year starter at guard where Nebraska just happens to have some pressing need. With Nuri Nwili gone at right guard, he moves on. Ethan Piper may or may not be back. He was the left guard starter all year, so Mazzccua can play either one of those spots. He's got 1 year left, immediately provides a boost to that line next year. So really fortuitous turn of events for Nebraska. You talk about luck being sort of that intersection of being prepared and having that right opportunity, and this is just that for Nebraska. So big news. Maybe it kind of gets lost in the news cycle with what's going on with basketball and the sport, college football at a national level, but that really big development for Nebraska, just as big as any portal ads they've had this cycle.
Evan, what's a really early grade that you would give Matt Rhule's transfer class this offseason?
Well, you got to go on quality, right? Not quantity with just the 4 to this point. But, you either go developmental or you go immediate need. And I think Bly Hill probably qualifies in the former category. They like him more long-term and don't need him to step in right away. But this January stretch of additions, I would say, it's solid. B plus probably at this point, just with Naor as somebody who can step in as a big play threat at receiver right away. Dowdell, certainly, the Oregon transfer running back, is somebody who has all the ability to come in with 3 years left and be an impact starter or playmaker right away. And then clearly Mazzccua is someone who you've got to feel good about being a factor and a starter on that interior moving forward. So, you look at what held Nebraska back last season. Clearly the offense was a part of that. You address seemingly the quarterback situation through the addition of Dylan Raiola and Daniel Kalen, and now in the portal you've seen them go out and augment some of the skill spots, and now Mazzccua. So the numbers were such that Nebraska was never going to add a big chunk of transfers the way that they had the last couple of years, but I think just the quality and the spots that they've addressed, I'd give it a solid B+.
And Evan, can you talk for a second about the splash of going and getting a guy like Mazzccua, an 11-game starter last year from a Power 5 program, Florida? I mean, it just feels optically like a big deal. It might not be the same need that Nebraska had at wide receiver along the offensive line. They had some younger guys that were probably ready to step up next year, but optically, this feels like a big deal that Nebraska's able to go steal a starter in an important spot from a school like Florida.
Absolutely. And it's a big deal because you can't count on adding quality offensive linemen from the portal. You can't do it. Like, if you want to find a receiver or a defensive back or even a running back, like, you can probably do that in the portal, but the numbers will tell you, like, if you're a quality O lineman in there, you're going to get offers from all over the place, and there just aren't that many big-bodied guys that want to look around and go elsewhere. And so, Nebraska absolutely found that. And Matt Rule said it before, like, even if you don't have room, you make room for a lineman on the offensive side or the defensive side. And I think that's kind of the case here. Like, they already had sort of a scholarship crunch. But if your circumstances line up the way that they did for Mazzccua, you have to add somebody like that, bring him in. And again, he could have gone all over the country. He took visits this cycle to Arkansas, to Syracuse. If he had expressed interest in just about any school, I think that's a guy that you make room for. And so for Nebraska, again, to have that in with him previously and to have the need and for that thing to develop late here with classes starting in just over a week, it's a perfect scenario for Nebraska, and it absolutely improves their outlook on offense next season.
Evan Bland with us here, Omaha World Herald, talking Nebraska in the portal, the world of college football. Hail Varsity Radio at Evan Bland, OWH. On Twitter is where you find him. Evan, timeline for Jamal Banks. Question 1. Question 2, what do you believe about Nebraska and Dana Holgorsen?
Well, Banks, I've exchanged a couple messages with him, and I think he's still kind of sorting some things out. I would expect in the next couple of days, maybe by this weekend. He understands that there's a timeline to this thing. Again, with UNL classes starting on the 22nd, you can't delay it too long. But I know Michigan was interested. He's checked out places like Notre Dame and Wisconsin and Purdue, and so he's got a lot of pros and cons to lay out there. I know he did enjoy his trip to Nebraska, and they spell it out to him, just like we all know, like, there's opportunity on that offense. So I think Nebraska is still very much in the mix there. So, again, we'll see pretty quickly how that turns out. And then, Holgorsen's been pretty quiet since the news broke last weekend that he was in town and talking with Nebraska. I still find it interesting, just given his sort of worldview offensively coming from the Mike Leach air raid system, that he would necessarily be a perfect match for Nebraska and what it has said it wants to do as a pro-style offense and more pounding the ground game and that sort of thing. So, again, just because they're talking doesn't necessarily mean that he would be the quarterback's coach. I think it's possible it could be as an analyst sort of position as well. But I do think just the fact that they've had the conversation with a guy like Holgorsen does say that Matt Rule in Nebraska are being pretty open-minded about who's out there, about what direction this offense can go as they try to find the best resources to develop Dylan Raiola and get this offense back on track.
Evan, going back to last night, let's switch it over to Husker basketball here real quick. Your just reaction of last night's game, what Nebraska was able to put together, and quite the resume builder when we're talking about that bubble come March.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a night for that team, for the program at large, to do that at home against a team like Purdue that's a bona fide Final Four contender. I mean, just really impressive from the top down. I think it showcased a lot of what Nebraska felt like it addressed in the offseason. I mean, it hit three-pointers at a strong clip. We saw contributions from all over the place, from different shooters, from Rink Mass defensively to Bryce Williams to Sam Hoiberg with a couple of steals and scores. Those were key momentum plays too. And the other thing I thought, big picture, guys, was like I was trying to think the last time there was so much joy across so many teams in the athletic department. I mean, what men's and women's basketball is doing, there's clear optimism for football. Obviously, what volleyball's done. Women's soccer was in the Elite Eight. Softball with Jordy Ball coming in, the track and field teams. I think people are excited about baseball. Like, there's so much positivity within the athletic department, and for basketball to get that number one win at home, it just really adds to the momentum. You have Matt Rule on hand. So it feels like the synergy within that department is as high as it's been maybe in the Big Ten era, maybe since before that. But a really cool moment for the program, really cool moment for those who were in attendance. And I think it just adds to the excitement about what the ceiling could be for the next couple of months.
Evan, we'll wrap with this. Evan Bland, Omaha World Herald with us. Okay, you saw a future Big Ten team Monday. You saw the old guard in Michigan ground and pound, and they were incredible in the trenches, as good as advertised. With Michigan, how do you view their championship? B, what you saw Washington, how do you think they translate to the Big Ten?
Well, the Washington part's interesting. I think that the sort of the school of thought going into the championship game was if Michigan continued to ground and pound, would Washington be able to hold up? And the answer was no. And kind of in a weird way, it kind of was the reverse, where they couldn't stop them early, and then they sort of settled in a little bit later. But I think it kind of reminds me a little bit of Nebraska's transition when it went to the Big Ten, a decade ago. It was designed defensively to stop spread offenses and these high-scoring shootouts. It's going to be a different animal when you're facing teams like Michigan or Minnesota or whomever week in and week out in the Big Ten. So I think that will probably be the biggest adjustment that they're going to have to make moving forward is how do you stop the run? How do you hold up in your front seven so you're not exposed to the extent that they were in the national title game? Michigan, such a complex situation. I mean, it's clearly documented that they broke the rules with the sign stealing. I think ultimately they didn't need to, right? They were going to beat those teams that they beat early in the season, I think, regardless. And then after the Counter Stallion stuff broke out, they were just as dominant, quite honestly, in the second half. And to beat Alabama the way they did, to roll Washington, I think, in sort of the no-doubt second-half fashion that they did, leaves little doubt that they, that they earned it on the field. But I understand the frustration. I understand, the fact that there need to be consequences for breaking the rules as well. And I think ultimately, big picture, hopefully what it spurs on is a move to modern technology in terms of mics and helmets and things like that to be able to relay plays. So hopefully stuff like this is not part of the sport moving forward.
Evan, great stuff. Thanks for the time today.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Mark Manning on the way with Hail Varsity.
Hail Varsity Radio is live. Now, back to Schmitty.
Schmitty's a great guy, but he don't have a brain.
And Elijah.
You want me to speak? When I point at you, yeah.
On Hail Varsity Radio.
Well, the countdown is on for Friday. It is Nebraska. It is Iowa. It is wrestling. It is head coach Mark Manning. Husker Wrestling with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, how we doing? Were you at the Well, were you at PBA last night? Were you storming the court, Coach?
I didn't storm the court, Chris. Hey, thanks for having us on. But me and my family were watching it and on Peacock, and it was great, man. So happy for Fred and his staff. They do a great job, and really happy for the players. I saw them today. A bunch of them, they were in the weight room, and I congratulated them. And hey, they say, hey, more's coming. So I love it.
Well, it's just been a really good time with Nebraska athletics, and your team is phenomenal, and the work you guys put in, incredible. I want to go back to Saturday, Coach Manning, and start with Polar Bear, with Nash. Big win for him against Wyoming Saturday. How big a deal was it, not just for him, but for the team?
Yeah, this thing is one. It's incredible. Nash's commitment and how we came about getting Nash to come out and join us, and he was really excited that we wanted him to come out, and Coach Rule and his staff, Coach Knighton, they were terrific. They were all about Nash, coming out, making the commitment, wrestling, seeing if he could do it. He had to shave 45 pounds, and he joined our team December 4th, made 285 on January 6th. That in itself is an accomplishment, and just getting in the wrestling shape he is right now. It took him to be a tough man, and that's what you have in Nash. He's a competitor. We knew that, and it's just a great story to see a young kid. I call him young, but he's got another year of college football to play, and who knows from there. And his aspirations are NFL. And I told Nash, hey, if you do this thing, this is going to take a lot of work to you're not wrestling Class B in Chamberlain, South Dakota anymore. It's Division I big boy wrestling. And so it's just really cool, Chris, really cool to see him accomplish it. And I think if general managers have half a sense, they'll take a chance on this guy next year, because not only as a football player, just as a person, he's going to add value to their team, and that's what he's doing for us.
Coach, obviously this came together this fall, but when did you first want Nash to be a part of the wrestling team? And then tell us a little bit about that story of how it actually came together here a little over a month ago.
Actually, Coach Rule and I got together. It really was just to talk about coaching, and there about 3 or 4 days before the Iowa.
Coach, we lose you?
What if he came out for wrestling, right? And we were laughing about, he's 330. I said, he's got to make 285. I don't even know if he could do that, And Coach Rule said, man, it'd be really cool if he did. Really, we didn't even think about it.
Coach, we got you.
Vegas for the Las Vegas Invitational Tournament. I reached out to Coach Rule, said, hey, you know what? What if I reached out to Nash, see if he would want to do it? And he was all on board. And Coach Knighton was all on board. And then I reached out to Nash, and he said, Coach, can I talk to my coaches? Well, I already knew the answer there. And then he said, I'll talk over with my family, and I'll get back to you. And next day he called and said, I'm in. And, he's been nothing but all in since he told me that, and that's just how he operates. It's, it's great. Now, I wasn't surprised by the result. You never know what you're going to get, but, he really controlled the anxiety, and, wrestling's a one-on-one battle, and so he had a lot of pressure on him, to do well, and, anxiety of you never wrestled a college match in your life, and so, there's a lot there for that young man to really compartmentalize, and he handled like a pro, and it's going to help him moving forward.
Mark Manning's with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Huskers and Iowa Friday, Bob Devaney Sports Center. Coach, I want to shift to the matchup and some big matchups. Kind of run down what you can share with us about Friday night, your excitement level and just the challenge.
Yeah, I think Iowa's got a terrific program. They've been dominant for the last 50 years in college wrestling, from Dan Gable to Jimmy Zaleski, and then the Brands brothers running the ship. They're tough. They're tough. They're physical. They're what wrestling's all about. And so, we think we have a great team, and we're going to find out on Friday night. I think we have just good matchups. We're starting at 125 with Caleb Smith. He's got to wrestle Drake Ayala. He's a very accomplished wrestler. So, just getting started off right, I think, will really help the Huskers. And then just up down the lineup, Jacob Van D at 133. And, Brock Hardy is going to wrestle the number one guy at 141. Real Woods is his name, and he's Big Ten champ, beat Brock in a really tight match. Well, actually beat Brock a couple times last year in really tight matches. And so, that's a big one for us to try to flip. And then we have Ridge Lovett, and we have Peyton Robb, and he's going to wrestle a couple time All-American and Jared Franick from Iowa. So they've wrestled a lot of times. And then, Antrell Taylor at 165 is wrestling All-American Caliendo from Iowa, who's a transfer kid. And then we have Bubba Wilson at 174. And we had the most popular guy, one of the most popular guys, I would say, Lenny Pinto. He's just he was banged up last week, Chris, in our two duels, but he's doing well this week, and he's back from a little dinged up shoulder. But I'm not sure who Iowa will put out there. I think they're trying to be sneaky a little bit. And then at 197, we have Silas Allred, and we feel great about Silas right now. He's wrestling really well, and then we're going to bring it home with the big polar bear, man. Polar bear is going to hit the mat and maybe bring us home a victory on Friday night.
So you're not being sneaky. You're saying it now. Polar bear is going to be the guy.
Oh, Polar Bear is going to be wrestling on Friday night.
Love it, Coach. Love it. Tell me really quickly here before we get you out, the advantage of not having to go to Carver Hawkeye to go wrestle. That's a tough place. They fill it up for wrestling. Instead, you're going to be at home, and with Nash Hutmacher on the mat and the star-studded lineup, you can assume that
all sorts of red
show up too. Lots of red going to be at the Devaney Center on Friday night. Tell me about that home mat advantage.
Yes, it's a big advantage. Fans might say, well, hey, it doesn't really matter. But when you wrestle at Carver Hawkeye Arena, 15,000, and they're maniacs. I'm talking about they're the most passionate fan base. It's just a different animal. I'm just telling you, it's like no other, wrestling environment. Just because they're just gung-ho, and, it's a tough environment to win. And so, you're taking 18 to 23-year-old kids in that environment. It's tough. You say, well, it's just a wrestling match, but it's they don't get beat much there. And so we love it being in the Bob Devaney this year. And so we want to take advantage of that from our side.
Coach, as we wind down, Mark Manning with us, Nebraska Wrestling, Iowa. The countdown on Huskers.com, 2 days, 55 minutes, and 5 seconds as we report.
I love it.
We get ready. Coach let us know the Polar Bear is going to be in action Friday night. But just a word to, you mentioned the home mat advantage that Elijah asked you about, but just tell me about your culture and what you instill in the young men that you recruit and bring in, and just a thought here globally, the responsibility you take as head coach, what you try and pass on to the team and the kids you keep bringing in.
Yeah, that's great, Chris. I love our culture, and it's really built on. And you walk in our wrestling room, it's built on attitude, effort, always. Attitude is speaks for itself. You have to have the right mental approach, and you have to have it's got to be important to you. So we look for kids that wrestling's important. It's important for us coaches. So when you have a good, when things line up, they're excited about the sport and they love the sport. They're going to put time in it to get better. And you as a coach have that approach, then that's when you have magic can happen. Guys can become All-Americans and they're going to be great student athletes and they're going to represent their team. And then, they have to have a great work ethic. There's a lot of guys that we've passed on that have been really talented, but we know from one reason or the other, we've done our research, they're not hard workers. That those guys aren't probably in our wheelhouse. Mm-hmm. And then, they have to be consistent, can be consistent performers. You have to be able to perform in the practice room. You got to be able to give the output that we would like, and that effort and that extra magic that you have to win at this level. And so that's kind of our culture. That's what we built it on. But there's a lot of things we look for in recruiting. But attitude and their effort is number one and number two.
Mark Manning, head coach, Nebraska Wrestling, the showdown with Iowa. Get to the Bob Devaney Sports Center Friday, 6:30. Polar Bear going to be in action, throwing that heavyweight around. And what a lineup, what a team Coach Manning's put together year after year after year. Coach, looking forward to it Friday. Thank you so much for giving us a few minutes.
Oh, thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Go Big Red.
Coach, you take care. Appreciate you. There he is, Mark Manning, with us. And letting us know what's happening on Nebraska Wrestling. Busy day. We'll continue on with Hail Varsity Radio.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back at you, it's Hail Varsity Radio. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Nebraska Orthopedic Center, Dr. Brandon Seifert is with us. Dr. Brandon, how are the Rays, brother?
Yeah, they're pretty nice, man. They are pretty nice. You bet. How's life for y'all back there?
It's a 7-degree wind chill. We'll just leave it there.
Oh, it's brutal. That is brutal.
It's not a 7-degree wind chill where you're at.
A little warmer here. Yep, a little warmer.
Well, let's talk NBA for a moment. Ja Morant of the Grizzlies, standout ball player, incredible talent.
But he just can't seem to stay on the court. Last year it was the flashing guns on Instagram Live. Now it's injury concern.
That's a different type of injury, potentially. This is season-ending injury as he had a subluxation of his right shoulder during a training session. Dr. Brandon, the MRI revealed a labral tear. We talk a lot of labrum issues, but not necessarily in basketball, do we?
No, not really. It's not all that common in basketball, at least not that you hear about. Obviously, I see a ton of these in a variety of athletes. I would say less common in our basketball players, not unheard of, but less common. But as we've talked about these before, thinking about these anatomically. So dealing with the shoulder is a ball and socket joint. On the socket side of the shoulder, that's called the glenoid. And then there is a ring structure that sits around the socket, kind of like a rubber gasket, called a labrum. It deepens the socket and acts as kind of a stabilizer for the ball portion. And so typically with these, you can have tears in that labrum kind of all the way around the ring that results in kind of different symptoms, different pathology. The most common of which that we see is where you start to have patients complain of shoulder being loose, instability, subluxation, or full-on kind of dislocation. And those predominantly occur to the front of the shoulder. So in orthopedic terms, we call that the anterior aspect of the shoulder. So when your shoulder dislocates, typically it goes out the front towards the bottom. And that's probably what he's dealing with in this scenario. Obviously, you can have tearing in the back of the labrum and be unstable towards the back, but we tend to see those more in kind of our football, wrestling-type athletes. But again, you can see them in basketball and football together. But that's typically the scenario that he's in. it's hard to say with this, how long he's had this. My guess is that if they're thinking surgery at this point, he's probably been battling this for a while, would be my guess.
So the thought is that the labrum tear happened before the subluxation of the shoulder?
Probably happened somewhere along the way where he basically, that ball portion kind of rode up on the top of that kind of rim of labrum, and it starts to slowly kind of peel that off. Either you'll have one kind of traumatic event here where you have one kind of full-on big dislocation, kind of tears off the whole labrum, and then as that heals back, it heals back at a lower level, and you're kind of less protected from that ball going forward, and then over time, just repeatedly, that gets worse and worse. And so my thought for him, just kind of based on how they're describing it, he's probably had subtle events here where that ball portion has just kind of steadily started slipping out, kind of wearing on that labrum, and just gradually, gently probably peeled off that labrum over time.
Dr. Brandon, let's talk about recovery, procedure recovery, and then how it could linger with Morant's return to form. He's been incredible when he's been healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think there's a very high chance he'll get back to a really high level. Should have a pretty high chance of returning back to the same level or higher, especially in the sense that he's not a throwing athlete, kind of a different perspective for them. But from the treatment perspective on this, the goal is to basically sew that labrum back down on top of the glenoid or the socket. We have a variety of techniques for that. Most commonly are using these things called anchors, which are these little sutures or plastic screws that we put into the bone, and coming out the back of those is suture material, and then we pass that through the torn labrum, and that basically cinches that down on top of the glenoid, which is the bony part, and then the labrum heals back to it over time. It's an arthroscopic procedure, has really high success rates. The biggest thing you worry about with any of these type of, instability type cases would be, redeveloping instability. For example, you're playing football and you have one of these procedures done, you go back out of the football field and some big fullback runs into you, then obviously that could tear through those sutures and re-injure yourself. Basketball, a little less chance of that happening, but still enough that you do worry about a recurrent kind of instability picture showing up in him down the road.
So specifically, you said they're stitching this back together. I mean, what does that look like in terms of the recovery process following the surgery? I assume the arm is going to be in a sling for a little bit, but is there any physical therapy that's going to be needed with that here in the next couple of months?
Yeah, great question. So, typically after these, you'll be in a sling with one of those pillows for about 6 weeks. Sometimes you get more aggressive and take it off at 4. And essentially, you're not really allowed to do active motion where you're kind of moving it yourself. You do passive motion, which we start therapy right away with these. We're pretty aggressive with it. So typically within a couple of days to a week, you'll start physical therapy on these. And that's how that goes. Then in terms of long-term recovery, so 6-week sling comes off, and you're just kind of doing some gentle active strengthening at that point. We don't really start any real more aggressive strengthening until you get about 3 or 4 months down the road. And then the variability comes, how quickly do you let them return back to contact? I would say the minimum is about 4.5 months. Sometimes you go longer, maybe 5 or 6 months. But you kind of hit that 4.5 month mark, 5 month mark, and you kind of turn them loose and you hit the weight room hard. And then if they can have another, anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks of really hard kind of weight room time, workout time to kind of get back to competition shape, that's kind of the ideal scenario for these, at least in these kind of athletes. The game changes, obviously, it's more of a throwing athlete in terms of recovery.
And Dr. Brandon, with Ja, he's a right-handed shooter. This is the right shoulder. Is he going to have to start holding his gun in the left hand now?
Jeez.
Might have to change the pose for the picture. I wasn't aware of that. That's kind of an interesting story. That was last year, huh?
Uh-huh. Yeah, multiple times. Even after being punished, he continued brandishing guns on his Instagram Live. So you can't do that, Ja Morant.
Okay.
Duly noted.
That is conduct detrimental to the league.
I would say. How detrimental is this to his outside game? And is it going to?
Not going to say shooting, huh?
No.
Careful.
Yeah. His outside game, and also is he going to be thinking about it, Dr. Brandon, when he gets to the rim, when he makes a move to the rim and finishing around the rim? It's super physical, even in today's NBA, not as physical, but you still take bumps and bruises when you do go to the tin.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Chris. So I think, outside shooting, probably not a huge issue for him. I think that'll come back nice and smooth. I think that technique for him will be pretty easy to redevelop. You're right, though. As you start to go to the rim, there's going to be some hesitancy there. So I definitely see a little while just kind of regaining that confidence piece to go back and be able to do that well. But in the end, I still think they'll do that well. But that's obviously the area where, he put himself most at risk for some type of re-injury event.
Last thought here, Dr. Brandon. It's expected he's going to be out till the start of next season. How does that timetable for recovery strike you, that he's probably not going to be back on the basketball court until next October? Well, he could be in terms of practice, but in terms of ready for game action next October. Is that timetable about right?
Yeah, I think that timetable is just perfect. You figure if you're going to give him that 4.5, 5 months of kind of getting back into shape mode, that puts us all the way back into June, July, season is done. So yeah, he should be ready to. He should look really good by the time October comes around, and he should get plenty of basketball playing in the summer. I'm sure he'll probably be kind of fully released to do everything. I'm guessing around July or August, if not sooner.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. Ja Morant, our topic. Dr. Brandon, you take care and enjoy. We'll check in again soon.
Okay, fellas. Take care.
Good stuff with Dr. Brandon Seifert, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Will wind down a Wednesday. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, where you find us with Hail Varsity Radio. Subscribe, download Hail Varsity YouTube channel. We'll say goodbye next.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time, it's Hail Varsity. We're powered by Cornhead Lager. Awesome stuff. Mark Manning, Nebraska Wrestling. Able to preview Nebraska, Iowa. Let the world know that Nash is going on Friday at the Devaney Center with the heavyweight round. Excited there. Incredible stuff earlier from Evan Bland. Mike Babcock, and what a buffet table of sports, and Nebraska still feeling good about the win over Purdue. Plenty there as we kicked off things with KP and Jake Mielheisen's greatest hits from last night. That was big time. Plenty of football news with Nebraska getting a plug-and-play offensive lineman at guard. And then, you have the news of Nick Saban stepping down. We'll play a fun game tomorrow and help our friends down in SEC country with Alabama. Some suggestions we have. 489-1240 numbers to get in if you want to squeeze in. Buyouts are pretty extraordinary, Elijah and Connor, for Dan Lanning. There are also a lot of agents out there kind of rubbing their hands together with a big old smile. As big a smile as you had last night on the floor as a Nebraska fan rushing the floor. These college football coaching agents, they are smiling too. Because even if my guy doesn't get the job or get a phone call, the AD may have to pay to not worry about that.
Well, money will not be an issue for Bama in this.
Never is.
Search. They will go get who they want to get regardless of the price tag. But yeah, I do think some coaches, I think Lanning, maybe he will go to Bama. I don't know. Whenever that's Bama's top priority right off the bat, you go, they're going to get who they want. But I wouldn't be surprised if he just made the decision if Oregon can match the offer that Alabama makes, I'll just stick around at Oregon. He's got a good thing going there, especially with them headed off to the Big Ten, knowing you can probably get some pretty big payouts down the road if you stay for 5 years with the future Big Ten media rights deals. So that's a possibility. I don't know, but all I do know is that the buyout will not be an issue for Alabama and whoever they want to go hire. And maybe they don't need to go buyout. Maybe they go Urban Meyer. Maybe they go Frost. Maybe they go Ferentz. I think one of those is only the realistic possibility with Urban Meyer. But I don't think money will be an issue for Bama in this coaching search. And I'd like to think that they likely already have a pretty good idea of who they're going to be hiring. I don't.
This is not a This is not a bombshell to the folks.
No.
To Greg Byrne or those in the Alabama circle of trust.
I don't think money is going to be an issue. I think we'll probably have a good idea of who the coach is going to be sooner rather than later.
Does
Tommy Rees, who says no?
Yeah, right. Does Saban, if there is an eventual college football czar, is he it?
The old Bill Dolman take from last week.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a brilliant take because Dolman's smart.
Love that.
Yeah. That said, do you want these? Do the college football conference commissioners kick up top I mean, do they secede their power? Real quick about your friends with the Omaha Supernovas, the first ever Pro Volleyball Federation match coming up here January 24th against the Atlanta Vibe. CHI Health Center. First serves at 7 o'clock. Get your single match or season tickets. Supernovas.com. World-class volleyball. That includes NCAA national champions, All-Americans, Olympians, and the volleyball movement sweeping across the country. The Major League Volleyball team in Omaha. Supernovas.com. Fellas, thanks for hanging out. Thank you in the stream. Thank you for listening. Back tomorrow on Hail Varsity YouTube, Hail Varsity Twitter.